Teacher burnout is a real issue for special education teachers. Therefore, today I would like to share 5 practical things that you can do as a special education teacher to avoid burnout in your career. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am Cindy Lumpkin and I am a special education teacher. Today I am going to discuss 5 things that you can do to avoid teacher burnout. Now I am going to count down from 5 to the number 1 thing that you can do to avoid burnout. So I need for you to stick around for all 5. So let's jump right into it. Number 5 is to find community. One of the things that I experience and millions of other special education teachers across our country experience is loneliness. Oftentimes, we are the only special educator in the building or on the grade level. And so we don't always have a lot of time to really connect with other special education teachers in our building if they are in our building. However, we must be intentional about finding ways that we can have that professional time or those professional relationships with other special education teachers. So if you do happen to have special education teachers in your building, even if they're not at your grade level or on your grade level teams, I would suggest that you be intentional and reaching out to that special education teacher and just forming some type of relationship where that you guys get to sit and talk with each other, even if it's after school going out for a drink. Another way that you can find community among special education teachers is through platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and so forth. There are several groups that I belong to on Facebook, and it is awesome to be able to go up and to vent, to ask questions. And so if you do not have your own community, then make sure that you find community, because it can definitely be lonely. And when we can't express how we're feeling, it only adds to the stress and the frustration that leads many teachers to a point where they get so frustrated that they're ready to throw in the towel. And I know that we are all really committed to our students, to our schools, and so forth. However, if you get to that point, I don't care how much you love your students, you're probably no good to them because you're no good to yourself. So we know that burnout among teachers in general, particularly special education teachers, is a real thing. So make sure you find community, make sure you find your tribe. The number 4 thing that you can do as a special education teacher is to speak up. Now, from just what I know about special education, from me seeing it play out in my own career, a lot of times special education teachers stay silent. There are things that go on, there are things that we're asked to do, and it really conflicts with the way that our schedule look or just with the way special education is ran. And instead of really speaking up, we often just try to make it happen, even if we're making stuff up or if we're faking it or what have you. But I would say that we have to get to a point where we are bold enough to really speak up and say, this is unrealistic for me and the situation that I have as a special education teacher. Now, what I will say is refrain from complaining. So when you have these conversations, you also want to have solutions. I would say never use special education to maybe get out of a duty per se. I would always say, here's the situation and here's why it probably can't be performed or why it's causing a lot more stress or a lot more work on my part, but here's a solution. And I think administration would appreciate that a lot more, or they would definitely have an ear to listen to you if you're not just coming to them with complaints, but come to them with solutions as well. Now, sometimes you just have to be bold and not worry about that paycheck. And I know that might be easier to say because this is our career, right? This is what we use to put bread on our own table, right? But I also say we can't be bound by a paycheck. Been there, done that. People run over you when they know that you need something. And a lot of times we work on our career or our jobs as if we need it, as far as a matter of life and death. And once again, I know it's much easier to say, but we have to be bold enough to speak up. It reminds me of a conversation that I had with a principal. This is when I was in administration. I was actually the department chair. And it's not like a teacher being the department chair of the English department, at least in the school, because it was so big. It was almost like being an assistant principal. Oftentimes, and I'm sure many of you can attest to this, you are often asked to do things that may not be legal or conflict with policy or the law, because once again, they just don't understand. And in that position, I often found myself always being on the defense, to the point where I felt like my principals were getting tired of me. There was this one conversation, and it was kind of heated between myself and a principal. I remember her saying very tactfully, she said, "You know what, Miss Lumpkin, this may not be the place for you." And when she said that, I instantly realized what she meant, meaning your job is on the line. And at that moment, and I can be a very emotional person. At that moment, I remember saying to myself, keep your composure. But at the same time, she has to know that that comment doesn't bother you. That's not gonna make me bend my will to do something I'm not supposed to do because she said that. So very calmly, I sat straight up in my chair and I looked her straight in the eye and I said, wherever I go is the place for me. And that was really, I can't even remember how we ended the conversation, because obviously she was a professional too, even though I felt like that, was a low blow to really kind of say to somebody, because she was insinuating that I wasn't going to be there. But I also had to let her know that I didn't care. And being a special education teacher, jobs run a dime or a dozen. So don't be fearful. Make sure you speak up when needed. Number 3, be seen. Once again, it is easy for the school not to see us as teachers, not to see our students, but you have to make sure that you are being intentional about immersing into the school culture. What do I mean? Some schools are not as sensitive to the special education population, so things happen, activities, programming, we're not a part of it. Special education teachers are not a part of planning it. Sometimes our students don't get an opportunity to participate in it. Well, I planned activities. If we weren't invited to things, I made things happen. And I remember one year, myself as well as the adaptive PE teacher, who was extremely passionate about special education. And she was probably the only other teacher in the building, or special education teacher in the building at that time, that met my passion for special education. So we, especially, I think it was Exceptional Education, Exceptional Children's Week, we planned this like week-long list of activities. And one of the culminating activities was to have our principal to walk a day in the shoes of a child who had a physical disability. So we talked to him, we asked him if he would participate by actually doing part or all of his day in a wheelchair. And he was game for it. We actually called to the local news station and asked them if they would come out and cover it. It turned out into a big deal. My principal enjoyed the attention. And from that day on, he saw me, he saw her, and we always had his ear. You have to be seen. When you're not seen, it's easy to stay hidden. It's easy to not be seen, but make things happen. That was the early part of my career, and it was one of the best assignments that I ever had. When we did things, we did it big. We did it so big that it forced people to say, wow, y'all doing that? Wow, how did y'all get that? Or how did you make that happen? So people may not see you, but you make them see you. Number two, and we have one more after this, is to change it up. I think the best advice that my professor in undergrad gave me was to change positions or change it up every 3 to 5 years. And I don't think I really understood what he meant, but it was always in the back of my mind. And even when I started doing it, it wasn't really intentional. I've had a lot of different assignments, positions, if you will, but they were all related to special education. So I say to you, don't just go into the profession saying that, hey, I'm going to spend 35 years in this one assignment, in this one classroom, working with this one group of kids. When I first started out as a teacher, I worked with low incidence population. Matter of fact, the moderately intellectually disabled. And we used to do a lot of like social skills, community-based learning. It was really, really fun. Like that was probably my most fun assignment, working with that category of students. But I didn't stay there. And really my heart is really with the higher incidence population, students with specific learning disabilities and, ADHD and all of that good stuff. So I moved from that to that. Then I became the department chair. There was other different things that I had. I actually also had training to become the transition coordinator. So in my mind, it was never just this one thing. And you might say, those positions are few and far between. What else I can do? There's tons of ways that you can change it up. If you're an elementary school student, go to middle school. If you are a high school teacher, go to middle school. So changing it up doesn't have to completely look like you are leaving the classroom. It might be like with me in the beginning. You might be working with just the group of kids with specific learning disabilities, the ones that's in mainstream. Change it up. Go and work with a lower incidence populations where you have to do something totally different. I think by changing it up, it helps you to really sharpen your skills as a special education teacher. And I think those things that I learned working with the lower incidence population totally helped me to be a better teacher when I was working with students who were mainstream and who had non-intellectual disabilities. There are sometimes that you might want to leave the classroom. So administration, there are a couple of different positions still within special education that is at the central office level, or even, like I said, with the transition coordinator. With my school, they worked in the school and they helped to prepare students for transitioning after high school, which was another fun position. But you know what? You might get to the point where you feel like, hey, it is definitely time for me to cut ties with the district altogether. Well, you know what? Tutoring is really in demand for special education teachers. And I know people who have made a full-time living as being a tutor, and yet they are a certified teacher. COVID, if it hasn't taught us anything else, I think it has opened up a new world of learning. There are some students who thrive online. You could think about maybe opening up an online school. Pods, you might say, okay, I don't want to necessarily have to go through the official process of having a school, but maybe you can be the instructional leader over a pod of homeschool students. There's just so many different things that you can do to change it up. The thing is, you must not have fear if you are going to go that route. And I think, and sometimes, once again, it may be easier said than done. But I think if you start working on the plan, if you write it down, you set goals, even if it doesn't happen right away, that will give you that motivation, that of working towards something, having something different in the horizon, even when you're going through a situation where you feel like, oh my God, I can't take it, to be able to say, look, if I can hold on, here I can do this, I can eventually do that. That is going to help you, once again, just to maintain your sanity as you go through all the crazy stuff that is associated with special education and being a special education teacher, particularly at the point that we're in now. And my number one thing that you can do to avoid teacher burnout is to remember your why. I can't say that enough. I feel like when I live life like that, in just about every decision that I make, I always come back to, what is my why? Why am I at this place? Why do I have to make this decision? Does it really flow with my why, my existence? You know, I am called to the field of special education. I just am. Like, there is no other, like, doctor, police officer, general ed teacher, none of that. Like, special education is it for me. And so those times when I'm having a hard time, when I'm being frustrated, I've always got to go back to my why. Why are you doing this? And you know, when you're asking yourself, for some of you, you're going to say, this really doesn't align with my purpose while I'm here, what I was created to do. And for those of you who it doesn't, then you're at a crossroad where you have to make a decision. Is being in special ed, is teaching special education really for you? For others, if you're like me and you're a diehard special ed, then you're going to know, like, okay, once again, this is a season of a rough patch, but I know I'm where I'm supposed to be. Now, I don't want to hijack this video with my personal why, but before I go, I would like to ask you guys, what are some other things that we can do to make sure we avoid teacher burnout? You die today, the district is going to fill your position the next day. And, you know, as blatant, as hard as that may seem, that is what happens. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Also, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If it added any value whatsoever, go ahead on and reward me. All right, guys, until the next time, I am Cindy Lumpkin, the LD educator. Have a good one.